I want to apologize ahead of time because I have two puppies and they're over here playing. If they let me pick them up in a second, I will show you. They're super cute. They're two little red healers that are about 2 months old. Anyway, so that's the squeaking you hear. Today, we're going to go ahead and talk about St. John's wort. Now, I've done videos before about St. John's wort and talked about the tincturing, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper into the medicinal uses of this wonderful plant. And I'm also going to show you how to make an easy herb infused oil and why, and we're going to talk about why you want to use fresh. And we're also going to talk about how to make an easy tincture and what you would use that for as well. Now, for students of our school who are enrolled in the Confident Herbalist tribe, that's our herbal membership with some more advanced topics, we actually forage for St. John's wort every year and ship it out to some of them who want it. And usually what happens is we get a few students who have missed the videos. So I'm putting this on YouTube and I'm refreshing them, and we're going to just start fresh here with the videos and explanations. All right, so what is St. John's wort, first of all? St. John's wort is an incredible herb. We do have a deep dive master class in the tribe on all of the science that surrounds this amazing herb. But it's native to Europe, and the immigrants brought it over hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and it's since naturalized to the United States and North America, Canada, and even into northern Mexico. It grows in a very wide range of places. It's a wonderful plant. It's invasive in some areas, so some places don't even ship it in, I think, but I'm not really sure about that. Anyhow, it grows crazy here in North Idaho, and I love that. When we moved up here, I was so happy because down in southern Nevada, where we lived off grid, I had to cultivate it, and I couldn't cultivate it in Las Vegas. I got a little plant this big one year. It survived the summer, and then it didn't make it through the winter. It just is, Vegas is really hard to grow some things in. But when we moved off grid into the mountains, I was able to cultivate it there, which was incredible. But then we moved here and it just grows everywhere. It's just such a wonderful plant. It's got little star-shaped flowers, and here I'm going to show you what one of the flowers looks like. So you can see what that looks like. It's got 5 larger petals and a cute little stamen in the middle. The leaves grow alternate at the stems. The stems are hairless, and there's a bit of space in between them. One of the indicators that you've got St. John's wort, and by the way, the Latin name for the medicinal St. John's wort is Hypericum perforatum. Now, the Hypericum comes from a chemical that it contains that's incredibly powerful, and then the perforatum comes from the fact that the leaves and the flowers have little holes in them, they think they're little glands. But if you pinch the buds of the plant, and I'll go ahead and do that right here. Can you see that purple on my fingers? That is the juices. That's the juices of the St. John's wort, and that's containing thousands of chemicals, really. But one of them is hypericin, and it evaporates pretty quickly. So a lot of herbalists will tell you, and I'm one of them, that it's really best if you can use the fresh herb. If you end up drying it, you can use it for tea and things like that. You'll still get some benefits. But the fresh herb is definitely best. And it just is. This is one of those plants where even if you're infusing an oil, which we're going to do in a moment, fresh is still best. Now, normally we don't infuse fresh herbs in oil because it tends to mold and get really yucky. And usually I'll even let my St. John's wort just wilt a little bit and dry out. This year I'm going to do an experiment and see how fresh I can get the oil to be, because I've heard in other places they just toss it in there fresh. They don't worry about wilting it. It's a dryish herb anyway, so it's very low moisture. All right, let's talk about some of the things that St. John's wort is helpful with, some of the benefits, and then we'll go ahead and get these oils and tinctures made for you. First thing that St. John's wort is really helpful with is inflammation. Inflammation can occur in the body in a number of different ways, but specifically St. John's wort's helpful in terms of muscle spasms, muscle overuse, soreness, nerve pain, things of that nature. It's helpful for gout. It's helpful for cramping. It's really a nice, if you can get the infused oil, but you can see this is how, you don't really see how red it is. It still has the plant matter in it, but it's a deep ruby red oil when it's all done. I love using that carrier oil when I'm making muscle rubs and when I'm making roller bottles and things like that that are meant to be more of a liniment type thing. I really enjoy using the St. John's wort oil because it's so helpful for conditions that are inflammatory and swollen. Another thing that St. John's wort is helpful with is to increase circulation. It's not as strongly circulatory herb like cayenne is, but it does still help to bring circulation to the peripheral areas of the body, especially if nerve pain is involved. And so I love working with it in terms of making salves and oils and even the tincture liniment for rubbing on the periphery of the skin, and that helps to bring relief to some nervous condition. Another area that St. John's wort just really shines is that it helps with digestion, and it helps with the liver, it helps with the gallbladder, it helps with all of these organs that are in the solar plexus area. It's also really helpful if you've got GERD or if you deal with acid reflux. St. John's wort is very helpful. Even if you just rub it on the upper part of the abdomen, it's great. Or you can just take the tincture and some water, and it can help with the over-relaxation of the pyloric sphincter. It's very helpful for that. We've probably all heard, or you've probably heard, about St. John's wort being the herb for depression, right? And I always laugh when I hear that because, to be honest, St. John's wort does have a very strong affinity for the nervous system and the brain, and that even includes the limbic system and emotional health. It tends to work on the neurotransmitters, and it's helpful for keeping, I'm simplifying this a lot, by the way, but it's helpful for keeping those good neurotransmitters, those ones that improve our mood, going in our system a little bit longer. It's really wonderful. That's also one of the reasons why you should not take St. John's wort if you're taking mental health medications such as SSRIs. That's one of the big contraindications with St. John's wort. So if you're on mental health meds, please avoid taking this herb internally. You can probably still take it topically, run that by your doctor, but for internal use, it would definitely be a no-go, okay? Also, since we're talking safety here, St. John's wort is one of the herbs, unfortunately, the medicinal herbs that has a lot of different herb-drug interactions. We call them HDIs. And so if you're on any medications at all, please do your research before you decide to take St. John's wort internally. But in terms of going back to mental health and the emotional state, if you're a person who's anxious, if you're a nervous person, or if you're dealing with nervous exhaustion, St. John's wort is really helpful, or can be pretty helpful for you, just depending. I like to think of this herb because it blooms at the summer solstice. It's getting the sunshine from the days when the sun is shining for many hours, and it's soaking it all in. And then we take this herb and we put it and we preserve it into a tincture or an oil or a vinegar or whatever it is we're going to use it for. And guess what? We've got it during the winter time when we need it. and I think that's just so powerful and wonderful that we can do that if we want to. St. John's wort, I'm going to talk a little bit about its antiviral properties pretty quickly here. It does have some pretty good antiviral indicators, and this actually goes along with the nervous system as well. So this is why I'm going to talk about this one next. It has an affinity, like I said for a moment ago, for the nervous system. Some viruses will decide to get into specific nerve cells and just start growing and replicating, and they're just not fun. So a specific family of these different kind of viruses are the herpes family viruses. So we've got our shingles, we've got chickenpox, we've got different strains of the herpes virus that present as cold sores or as sores on the skin or as genital types of sores. And St. John's wort taken internally and even topical use, especially with lemon balm, which is another very strong antiviral that's helpful with those situations, is super great. Just going to say I love working with this herb for that reason. Another thing St. John's wort does mildly is help with relaxation and sleep. This also has to do with its actions on the neurotransmitters in the brain. But St. John's wort might be a helpful agent for you if you suffer from insomnia or the inability to relax. And I love this. St. John's wort is hepatoprotective. This means that it supports the liver. It protects the liver and it helps it regenerate. And that's something we all need in these toxic times. I think we all could use some liver support. Before we go on, I just want to talk about one other safety contraindication for St. John's wort. We just talked about the fact that if you're on medications, you need to talk to your doctor, and it's very likely you won't be able to use St. John's wort internally. But another safety factor is that it can be phototoxic if consumed in large amounts. People realize this with livestock because livestock would be grazing in these pastures and they would eat large quantities of St. John's wort. And especially for lighter colored animals like white cows or white goats, some of them exhibited phototoxic symptoms and some even died of sunburn, excessive sunburn, and they think that it was because of the St. John's wort. Herbalists in general, if they're responsible, will like to say that if you're a person with very sensitive skin or if you are fair skinned, just be careful with how much you're taking internally. Now, most dosing is not going to be big enough to cause a problem for most people, but just be cautious with it if you're concerned about that. I have to say, we had a herd of goats a few years ago here in Idaho, and they cleared the fields for us, and they ate massive amounts of St. John's wort and didn't have any issues at all. And I'm a firm believer in that most animals can self-medicate in the fields, especially wild ones. Domesticated animals are another thing, but I think all animals, even humans, have that ability to just know if something's good or bad or not for you, but not all the time. So just be aware of this, be careful, and if you're concerned about it, do some research, and you always have the choice not to use it. But I've been using it for years, and I'm very fair-skinned and have no problem with it whatsoever. All right, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to talk about what I've been doing here. So this plant is very fresh, actually. This actually came out of our chicken coop, which I love because there's those little Japanese green beetles. They love to eat St. John's wort, and chickens love to eat beetles. So it's really helpful. What I like to do when I gather mine, but it's the buds and the flowers that are the highest, have the highest amount of the chemicals that we want. So I just take my scissors and I just snip off the tops of these plants. Now you can also use the leaves, okay? So if you want to, make sure I get all those flowers. If a few stems, by the way, is not going to hurt. You can just take the leaves and strip them off. There you go. Just garble them right off the stem, and now you've got some extra leaves in there too. All right. You can see I've got a big pile of stems over here. All righty. You want to fill your jar about 3/4 of the way full. And so that one's here, and I've got some more over here. Put this in this jar. These are actually gallon-sized jars. If you're a student, your amount of St. John's wort that you're receiving will be dependent on how much you ordered, and you would have talked to my husband about that. So I have no part in all that. I just teach people how to make things. But you want to fill the jar about 3/4 of the way full, give or take. It doesn't have to be exact. And then you're going to go ahead and pour in your solvent or your liquids. All right, let's start with the tincture first. So we're going to use ethanol alcohol, which is basically vodka. I have read that some herbalists like to use the high proof alcohol, which is 195 proof. And honestly, I'm just going to talk about my opinion on that. I think that's overkill, to be honest, for most herbs. Most herbs actually do really well in 80 proof alcohol. So this is fresh plant matter, so it's going to be more juicy. It's going to have more fluid in it. So because of that, I'm going to not use 80 proof. I'm also not going to use 195 proof, which is almost 100% alcohol. I'm going to go middle of the road and use 150 proof. That's 75% alcohol and 25% water. The reason I like to use a mid-level proof of alcohol most of the time is because most plants are going to have constituents that are soluble in alcohol, and they're also going to have constituents that are more soluble in water. So I really feel like using a mid-proof alcohol like 170, or this is 151, which is 75% alcohol, this is going to it's enough alcohol to protect the whole tincture from any excess moisture, because again, this is very dry plant matter. It's not a really moist plant. And I'm also going to have some extra water in there for extraction purposes. And I like that. I think that's a good idea. And I've made this St. John's tincture over the years with 80 proof alcohol. I have used 100 proof alcohol. I've tried it with 195 proof alcohol. And I just really don't like the 195. I think it's really a lot of alcohol. It tends to burn. And again, you're missing out on any of the water being able to extract the constituents as well. That's my little view as a practicing herbalist, having experienced all of this myself. And I just want to say, herbalists all have their own ways of doing things. This is kind of a science and an art. And I always recommend for people to don't just believe one herbalist, do some research and listen to a number of different herbalists and get some different opinions about different ways of doing things, and then do some experimentation. You want to always, if you can, and it takes some time to do this, right? You want to experiment for yourself, and then you can decide for yourself what works best. All right. I had some partially emptied bottles here. That's why I have so many bottles. Now I have 5 different Everclear bottles sitting over here. And I'm going to have to actually go in the apothecary room and gather some more because I don't have quite enough in here. But once you get your alcohol in, what I want to do is be sure that the plant matter is completely covered. So I'm going to take and fill the bottle up to about where my finger is right here. And that should make sure that all the plant matter is submerged. All right, then what you do is you just shake it. You want to shake it periodically during the 4 to 6 weeks that it's processing and macerating and breaking down. And your tincture is going to turn a beautiful red color pretty quickly. The alcohol tends to extract the hypericum beautifully. There's that with the tincture. Again, remember, I am going to fill this up a little bit more so that I'm just going to go do it right now. Okay, I'm back with one more bottle. We're going to, oh, shoot, that's okay. I'm going to tell you what I just did and why it's actually probably okay. All right, let's get that in there. I just want to say, this is an example, what I just did, of the flexibility of herbalism, okay? And sometimes you can have real problems. All right, I'm probably going to have to take some of this plant matter out, so you may have to do that too. But you definitely want the plant submerged under the alcohol. And I just have a lot of plants in here, so I think we're okay. All right, it's looking good though. Okay. Normally I like to stay a little bit over an inch from the top of the jar when I'm making a tincture. I just feel like that's the best. All righty, so there's that. Now, I want to mention this is for personal use. This is not going to be sold or shared. All right, you probably just saw that I poured a splash of alcohol into the oil bottle. That's actually, for the amount that I poured in, it's probably going to actually be helpful. So there's something called the alcohol intermediary method. And if you look at my comfrey salve video, which I did, that's the method that we used. And I explain why in that video, but we'll link to it above here. It actually can help to break down some of the constituents. And sometimes oil doesn't extract everything really well. In this case, I'm not actually upset. It's probably actually a good thing. All right, but typically, if you are making your oil infusion, you don't have to put the alcohol in. You can just go with the oil, and that's actually what I usually do. Okay, so let's go ahead, and what I've got here is just olive oil, This is extra virgin. It's organic, which I like. And it's just the Kirkland olive oil. So when I'm making herbal preparations for topical use, I'm pretty fussy about what I use, especially when it comes to essential oils. But when it comes to carrier oils, I want to use organic if I can, for sure. And then make sure that you've got the best buy date of the oil. Usually olive oil is good for at least a year after you've opened the bottle. And your oil is going to be good for as long as the shelf life of the oil is. So just keep that in mind when you're making your herbal preparations. And if you're trying to choose a good carrier oil, I want to mention jojoba oil. Jojoba oil is really wonderful because it has a super long shelf life. Like, it's long. I've heard up to 20 years. I've heard other people say about 5 years. Probably nobody knows because it gets used up so quickly. But I really like using it. And this is what you do. I'm going to go ahead and shake this. And eventually, this oil is going to be a deep, dark, beautiful red like this one is. And then it will be ready to be used. So same thing, you want to be sure your plant matter is submerged completely. That's very important. Add a little more olive oil. And I have people ask me sometimes, plants differ in how they act, depending on if they're fresh, if they're dried, in how absorbent they are. So sometimes you're going to end up getting a little extra plant matter in, and you might want to have to split the jar. And there's no issues with doing that. If you get too little plant matter in, that's more of a problem because you're not going to get a strong and powerful preparation. It's better to have too much than too little. You can always take some out and then add more of the solvent to the other jar if you need to. There you go. If you're a student of mine and you're purchasing the fresh St. John's wort flowers from us, then that's how you make your alcohol tincture, and this is how you make your infused oil. And then you're just going to let these sit for 4 to 6 weeks, and it should be a beautiful red color. One last thing I want to mention, and I always get this question: should you put your tinctures and your infused oils in a sunny window or not? And there's different methods and there's different opinions on this too. I happen to be a fan of the solar infusion method, which means if you've got a plant, some herbs that are tincturing, if you can put them in a window that's not being blasted by the sun, you don't want to do a south window, for example, but a window where there's just some gentle warmth, especially if you're in an air-conditioned house or you're in a cooler area like we are, that can really help speed up the maceration process and the breaking down of the plants. That's my opinion. I have other people who say, no, never put your plants in the sun. It's going to degrade everything. Yeah, if you leave it there for months on end, sure. But if it's there for 4 to 6 weeks, it's just fine. Trust me. I've done this a lot of times over the years. But that again, that's just an opinion. And again, people do it different ways. So you experiment and figure out what you think is best. I'm always interested in hearing. One final thing I want to share with you as I look at this table and workbench is that you're going to find with your St. John's wort, when you get it fresh, if you're a student or if you're going to go harvest it, you're going to find little teeny tiny, they're very small, brown or black seeds. You can save these. If you're in an area where it might grow, I am a real fan of saving them and just disturbing the soil. St. John's wort likes to grow in pretty poor soil, to be honest. So if you've got some poor soil in your yard or a difficult area, just maybe scrub it up a little bit and then toss the seeds out there in the fall, and you may get St. John's wort the next year. And then wouldn't that be wonderful? All right, this is Heidi Villegas. I'm with Healing Harvest Homestead, and here you saw an herbal error that is not really an error at all. And you learned a lot about St. John's wort. You learned about what it does. You learned about using it topically a little bit. You learned a little bit about using it internally. If you have questions or comments, because I know I didn't answer everything in this video, please go ahead and leave them in the comments section below. And I love you guys. I will see you in the next video. Oh, please subscribe and share. That's so helpful. All right.